Distintos convidados, minhas senhoras e meus senhores, internautas que nos acompanham a partir de várias plataformas digitais, inclusive a partir do Facebook da Rede Moçambicana dos Defensores de Direitos Humanos, bom dia e sejam bem-vindos a este evento importantíssimo que está a ser transmitido, como já fazia referência, em direto para as plataformas digitais. Este evento denominado Lançamento do Cartão de Identificação de Defensores de Direitos Humanos e do Relatório sobre a Situação dos Defensores de Direitos Humanos é organizado pela Rede Moçambicana dos Defensores de Direitos Humanos e a Rede dos Defensores de Direitos Humanos da África Austral, Southern Defenders, no âmbito do projeto Construindo Resiliência, Inclusão e Capacidade dos Defensores de Direitos Humanos em Moçambique. Ao longo do nosso evento, vamos ter algumas intervenções através da plataforma Zoom, em português e também em inglês. Entretanto, está cautelado o sistema de tradução simultânea e mesmo para que este serviço decorra sem sobressaltos, as intervenções dos nossos intervenientes serão um pouco pausadas para permitir a tradução. Minhas senhoras e meus senhores, com a vossa permissão, para fazer as notas de contextualização, convido, com a vossa permissão, o professor Adriano Vunga.
Muito bom dia a todas e a todos.
Bom dia.
Espero que estejam bem. Os que nos acompanham aqui presencialmente e aqueles que o fazem virtualmente através das mais variadas plataformas. Meus caros, estamos aqui hoje para o lançamento do cartão do Defensor de Direitos Humanos. E também vamos lançar o relatório da situação dos defensores dos direitos humanos neste contexto eleitoral. Deixa-me falar um pouco do cartão do Defensor de Direitos Humanos. Este é um cartão que visa facilitar a identificação dos defensores de direitos humanos, particularmente em contexto de realização de eleições quanto este, mas também serve para reforçar a proteção dos defensores. Fazemos este evento hoje num contexto em que já decorre a campanha eleitoral. Se estiverem recordados, temos difíceis memórias da vida de defensores de direitos humanos em contexto de eleições. Em 2019, em pleno ciclo eleitoral, na realização da campanha eleitoral, foi bárbara e cobardemente executado o defensor Anastácio Matavel. O único crime que ele cometeu é acreditar que, enquanto defensor de direitos humanos, sendo defensor aquele que se coloca à disposição, realiza atividades para que os outros possam realizar os seus direitos, incluindo os direitos políticos e civis, destacadamente o direito de voto, fundamental. Então, os observadores que fazem, eles participam para que as condições em que se realiza o processo de voto seja transparente, seja efetivamente de expressão da vontade popular e acontece em conformidade com as leis do país, destacadamente a Constituição da República e as leis eleitorais. Este é o crime que Anastácio Matavel cometeu para ser crivado com 10 balas. E quando se criva um defensor de direitos humanos, não estão necessariamente a crivar a ele apenas. Estão a tirar balas contra todos aqueles que, sendo ativistas, se colocam à disposição da sociedade para que possamos continuar a erguer e a consolidar a nossa infraestrutura democrática. E, nesse sentido, estamos aqui hoje para lançar este cartão. Aqui na cidade, pode até parecer redundante lançar este cartão, mas vamos imaginar os defensores que estão nos distritos mais recônditos, nos postos administrativos mais recônditos do nosso país. Este belo e extenso Moçambique, que se estende do Rovuma ao Maputo e do Zumba ao Índico. Este cartão é fundamentalíssimo. Este cartão é fundamentalíssimo. Mas nos recordemos também, meus caros, que foi lá em 2019 que jovens defensores da democracia foram detidos na província de Gaza, na cidade de Chokwe. E o crime que eles cometeram também é de dizer que nós queremos ver o processo de apuramento eleitoral. Não se pode carregar urnas para ir contar na esquadra. As eleições não acontecem na esquadra. Aconteceram aqui. Tem que ser aqui onde se faz a contagem. E, se não há energia, que se acendam velas. Mas tem que acontecer a contagem. E, por esse crime, foram detidos de forma ilegal, foram encarcerados de forma ilegal e ficaram 49 dias. 49 dias. E, na realidade, meus caros amigos, a rede moçambicana dos defensores de direitos humanos nasce dentro deste contexto da detenção dos jovens defensores da democracia e do assassinato de Anastácio Matavel para proteger, para reforçar a infraestrutura de proteção dos defensores de direitos humanos, para que eles continuem lá onde que eles são mais necessários para realizarem o seu trabalho. Hoje é o lançamento do cartão do defensor. Este cartão, não somente, como já disse, permite essa identificação, mas também, com o tempo, o cartão vai nos permitir atender a situações de emergência. Ontem, recebo uma mensagem pela madrugada de uma defensora que está em Chimbonila a dizer: estou a receber ordens para sair daqui porque estou a ser acusada de organizar jovens para trabalhar, para participar em processos. E ela precisa que tomemos ações para que ela possa apanhar o chapa mais rápido para ela sair de lá. Tem que acionar mecanismo para mandar o valor para ela. Com este cartão, ele vai passar a ter um chip. Sabe o que é um chip, aquela coisinha? E com aquele chip, podemos mandar o valor prontamente. Com a particularidade de, com o valor no chip, não tem que ir ao banco, só tem que ir ao agente do M-Pesa, descontar o valor e pagar o transporte e vai. Portanto, não tem que novamente ir se expor a instituições que podem fazer parte desta cultura de repressão em sítios mais pequenos quanto sejam os distritos. Portanto, hoje marcamos uma nova era em que não somente vamos identificar os defensores, mas também vamos acessar a eles quando, em caso de necessidade, de forma rápida, eficiente e, importantemente, em contexto um pouco mais discreto e não de exacerbação da sua exposição ao risco em que estavam. O cartão, o primeiro cartão de defensor de direitos humanos vai ser o cartão 001, vai ser atribuído a uma senhora que dedicou a sua vida a lutar para a promoção, respeito e defesa dos direitos humanos em Moçambique. Estou a falar da ativista Alice Mabota. Alice Mabota, como todos sabemos, é pioneira deste movimento. Eu não faria o trabalho que faço hoje se a Alice Mabota não tivesse começado este trabalho. Fazermos este trabalho é honrar a obra da Alice Mabota, é dar continuidade à obra da Alice Mabota. Alice Mabota está doente, está no hospital, está doente. ela combateu um bom combate. Mas está doente. Está doente. Precisa de todos nós. Precisa do nosso apoio. Com esta iniciativa de atribuir este cartão primeiro a Alice Mabot, não só iniciamos a celebração da vida e obra dela, celebrar o legado dela, como também queremos mobilizar a sociedade para tendo feito este combate, está no hospital, precisa do nosso apoio, precisa da nossa ajuda. Os tratamentos médicos são caríssimos. Então, não vamos medir esforços para nos mobilizarmos, fazermos uma corrente para ajudar esta defensora, que é a mãe das mães de todos nós, a mãe deste movimento da luta pela defesa, proteção e respeito de direitos humanos e pelo espaço dos defensores de direitos humanos em Moçambique. E termino reforçando a necessidade de mobilização e dizer que nós, como início, já mobilizamos um valor para a Alice Mabot, que vai ser entregue à família, mas é bastante pequeno para aquilo que se precisa. Então, este é um ato inicial, precisamente para encorajar os outros e todos quantos vimos e conhecemos Alice Mabot, para nos mobilizarmos nessa importante onda de solidariedade. Como sabem, meus caros amigos, estimados, a solidariedade é a nossa única moeda. A solidariedade é a nossa única moeda. O que podemos fazer é nos organizarmos em solidariedade, solidarizarmos-nos com aqueles que, nesta luta, são apanhados por enfermidades e aqueles que, até sem ser enfermidade, tombam, como tombou o nosso irmão, amigo, defensor, o Anastácio Matavel. É a solidariedade a nossa moeda. Então, vamos espalhar esta nossa moeda, a de solidariedade, para ela, para ele e para todos os defensores, para mantermos viva esta chama da defesa, proteção e respeito de direitos humanos no nosso país. Muitíssimo obrigado.
E estas foram as notas de contextualização. Passamos agora para as notas de abertura deste evento bastante importante, não há dúvidas. E mesmo para as notas de abertura, convido a doutora Alice Mogwe, presidente da Federação Internacional dos Direitos Humanos, que vai fazer a sua intervenção a partir do Zoom.
Bom dia a todas e todos. My warmest greetings to the national authorities of Mozambique here present, to representatives from the international community, dear colleagues and fellow human rights defenders, and my dear friend Adriano. It is indeed a great pleasure to be with you today, albeit virtually, for the launch of the Note on the Situation of Human Rights Defenders and Civic Space in Mozambique. This has been produced collaboratively by the Mozambique Network of Human Rights Defenders and the Observatory for the Protection of Human Rights Defenders. I'm delighted that this is also an opportunity for the launch of the Human Rights Defenders identity cards in Mozambique. When I first heard about the tragic killing of Dr. Anastácio Matavel in 2019, just before the municipal elections of which he was going to be an observer, I was surprised by the violent nature of that act. I was also saddened by such a blatant attack on democracy and human rights, but also by how little his assassination resonated internationally. Dr. Anastasio Matavel was a renowned human rights defender, and the lack of an appropriate response to that killing and public accountability for his killing suggests that perhaps there are other human rights defenders who are vulnerable to attack and may have been attacked, but with little known about this beyond the very local level. This year, 4 years after the killing of Dr. Anastasio Matavel, Mozambique is again preparing for municipal elections to be held in a few days and for the general elections to be held next year. The protection and safety of human rights defenders should now more than ever be high on the agenda of both the national authorities and the international community represented in Mozambique. This is why one of the themes in this note, which we're launching today, is Silenced Voices, attacks against civil society and human rights defenders in Mozambique. Indeed, the working environment for human rights defenders seems to be very restricted in today's Mozambique, and this is because both the challenges which are encountered in the exercise of, as well as attacks against, the freedoms of association, of assembly and demonstration, as well as of expression. In addition, the level of impunity for perpetrators of threats and attacks against human rights defenders, sadly, remains very high. Speaking both as a citizen of Botswana and president of the International Federation for Human Rights, it was with great personal pleasure that I celebrated the admission of the Center for Democracy and Human Rights, CDD, to the FIDH family during our FIDH Congress in October 2022. CDD is the only FIDH member in Mozambique. In May 2023, the activism and leadership of Professor Adriana Novunga and the professionalism of the CDD staff enabled the Federation to conduct a mission to Mozambique. This was in the framework of the Observatory for the Protection of Human Rights Defenders. And this observatory is in fact a partnership between FIDH and OMCT, the World Organization Against Torture. I would today also like to recognize a deeply symbolic gesture by the Mozambique Human Rights Defenders Network of the Southern Defenders through their choice of the recipient of the very first ID. The first ID will be given to Miss Alice Mabota, the godmother of human rights in Mozambique, and she's very well known to us in the Southern Africa region. Ms. Alice Mabota founded and developed the biggest ever human rights organization in Mozambique, the Mozambique Human Rights League. She deserves to be celebrated while she is still with us, to know how much she's appreciated and valued. And I'd like to add my personal note, because I have worked with her for several years. I hope that the launch of this report and of the Human Rights Defenders ID cards will contribute to shedding light on, as well as improving, the protection of human rights defenders and civic society in Mozambique. Civil society space too. This is a country whose human rights situation is not sufficiently known regionally as well as internationally. I do hope that in the coming days and months ahead of your 2024 general elections, we shall see concrete measures taken by the authorities to do three things. Firstly, to prevent defamation, threats, intimidation, attacks, and harassment of human rights defenders. Secondly, to promote positive narratives about the key role played by human rights defenders in society. And thirdly, to create space for constructive dialogue and cooperation between human rights defenders and the authorities. I remain deeply convinced by the power of networks and ongoing social interactions for the defense of human rights. I'm therefore very supportive of the initiative of CDD to develop the Mozambique Network of Human Rights Defenders. I strongly encourage the RMDDH as it works towards its institutionalization and recognition. I call upon partners to work together with them and support this key initiative for civil society in the country. Finally, I wish to express my solidarity with all Mozambican human rights defenders. We are in this struggle together, nationally, regionally, internationally. This struggle for the fight for justice and for human rights. Human rights defenders working together within and across national borders can play a key role in the development of the country and the strengthening of human rights for the sustainable development of the people of Mozambique. Obrigada.
Muito obrigada, Alice Mogue, por se ter juntado a nós neste dia muito importante e porque é, sem sombra de dúvidas, um evento que carrega bastante importância, como já fazia referência. Recebemos hoje como convidado, como visitante também ao nosso país, o presidente da African Defenders e diretor executivo da Defenders, Dr. Hassan Shire, a quem desde já passo a convidar para as notas de abertura.
Thank you for your kind words. Good morning. Good morning. Morning. Still, you are preparing yourself for the election. You must be very activism. I bring to you all protocols, first of all, observed. I'm very happy to be back in this beautiful country of Mozambique. I came in '98 as a young man like this gentleman here, under the invitation of Madame Grace Michel, when she was launching her report on children and armed conflict in the continent and then globally. And my memory was still rife, and last night we were touring around with the Professor Adriano. So I was recalling the roads, the places where we have been. It still remains beautiful with beautiful people who are maintaining. So this love and respect, I bring you back to you. I see you here under the CTT very able leadership of the Professor and also Southern Defenders and then Pan-African Human Rights Defenders Network. We are all united across the continent. I just want to describe a little bit the Pan-African Human Rights Defenders, and then I will give you a small heads up on the activities you are undertaking and who you are. Start point is that Pan-African Human Rights Defenders Network was a follow-up of the All-African Human Rights Defenders Conference organized by Amnesty International in 1998 on the 50th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in Pretoria and in Johannesburg. Hundreds of African human rights defenders who were at that particular time at risk from majority of African continent gathered there. They advanced what we call the Johannesburg Declaration and the Plan of Action, and also selected continuation committee to continue to Paris, where the celebrations of the Global Summit of Human Rights Defenders were taking place. At the Palace de Charlotte, again we gathered, and two events have been witnessed. One was the declaration of human rights defenders by the General Assembly on December 9, 1998. And another event which is a very important of ending impunity was in the UK House of Lords accepted a warrant, arrest warrant to Pinochet, a dictator from Chile. That arrest warrant from a judge or investigator from Spain has a jurisdiction of this gentleman who was claiming immunity to be served and formally arrested. He was in a sick bed. But that shattered what you call avoiding accountability. Even if you are head of state, at a later day, you will be facing the universal jurisdiction. Any person can file that so that justice will be delivered, even though delayed. After that, as you may recall, you had the various mechanisms which has come up. I don't want to go now into America, others, but two mechanisms are very important in this context. One mechanism is the African Commission on Human and People's, African Commission on Human and People's Rights have adopted a mechanism for the protection of human rights defenders. On October, this next month, the 77th assembly or session of the African Commission will take place in Arusha, Tanzania, closer to home. You might want to come and participate, and I invite Professor Adriano to come with a strong delegation from Mozambique so that you will see your continent. And one thing I can assure you is that Portuguese is one of the African language, so you will be having a translation also to follow the proceedings. The other mechanism, which are very significantly important for you, is the EU adopting the declaration, what do you call, the Declaration of Human Rights Defenders to be implemented in third countries. So they adopted the guidelines, EU guidelines on human rights defenders. One of it is that a word recognition politically, diplomatically, and then financially to be given human rights defenders in third countries. So the EU created an instrument whereby African Defenders is a member of the consortium which manages a grant for the benefit of African human rights defenders who are present here. With that infrastructure, then we organized Pan-African Human Rights Defenders Conference in 2009 to examine the plan of action and declaration which we adopted in Joburg, how far it has been implemented. And then formation of the networks. Now we are finding Southern Defenders, West African Human Rights Defenders Network, Central Africa Human Rights Defenders Network, North Africa Human Rights Defenders Network, and West Africa Human Rights Defenders and Eastern Horn. We are now together, all of us, thematic representations. So I celebrate the presence here of the chairperson of the Southern Africa Human Rights Defenders Network, who is now hosting us, or what you call Southern Defenders. And this is the crucial network in southern part of the continent. All of you present here, you are in around 7 categories of human rights defenders. And you particularly, if you find you are one of these 7 categories or 8 categories, you are particularly at risk and need to have a security plan, need a digital security to hygiene your information and secure it, need ABCD, which I'm sure CDD and Southern Defenders are conducting for human rights defenders. A, you may be a member of a group who defend land rights, activating a resource extractive area of your country, protecting human rights workers who are demanding protection of the rights of the communities being got caught of these developmental activities. You might be election monitors. As you have been hearing now, elections before, during, and after they bring different risks to human rights defenders. Before, most of the states, they bring upfront laws to arrest the space of right to protest. They don't want assembly, they don't want association, and they don't want you to speak up. When these three rights and freedoms are being arrested, it means the society cannot express and make what we call it elaborate choices or informed choices of whom to elect and participate the electoral process system very wisely. You might be one of the activists protecting SOGI rights, members of the LGBTI groups, who express themselves differently, who may look or perceive it to be looking differently, but they are part of a society. They face a specific and particular risk than any other human rights defenders. Then you might be campaigning to end the impunity, because now we have been told there are people who have been killed who were fighting for human rights. And that needs people like you to continue to shed light in order to gain justice for the families and survivors of these individuals, and also for yourself. Because, as Professor Adriano said, human rights defender killed, it means that bullet not only killed one individual, it has shattered our hopes and dreams, all of us. So that kind of impunity, there are people who are following, either journalists or human rights defenders. They also face very peculiar risk than any other groups. Then those who investigate high-level corruption. I was listening, and I think it's not controversial, on BBC about 2 billion money which has been cashed out of the excitement of gas and oil have been discovered in your country. In your name, there are activists who are following that, to see that people who have taken that money on your behalf, they have taken that money on your behalf. Have you got the money? Are being brought to justice, and also that money to be recovered into the coverage of public goods and services. They face particular risk. Then there are groups, and all is in Mozambique, who may be working in a situation of conflict. Crossfire. On the one hand, a terrorist group. I don't use much that, but we call it negative forces. Forces who exist to do negative things. And the law enforcement, either regionally, other African countries, or your country. They are activists who want to tell the truth. Both sides will not accept that truth unless you are telling them you are correct. They deserve very specific measures of protection, those brave human rights defenders and journalists. And then those who defend are people with disability. I emphasize this because all the wars, I remember as a young child growing up in Mogadishu, I used to sing songs all the time pertaining Mozambique, Angola, Guinea-Bissau, all that. Ziad Barre, when he was president in Somalia, and he was a chairperson of African Union that time, we have been galvanized as an entire nation to support the freedom fighters of Southern African countries, from Zimbabwe, that's why I was told, Professor told me there's a road named after Muhammad Ziad Barre in Maputo. So people who have been on that context now, they, from that time onwards, wars, civil war, liberation war, there are a number of people who are disabled, who are physically challenging. And they don't have access, most of the buildings, even the government hospitals and other. I stand corrected. But there are people who advocate for them. Open the door for them. You open this door. These people have to go inside. They also might not be liked in some situations. And youth activists, the last one. Young people, and this room is full of young people, standing up for the rights of their communities. and mostly digital rights, ICT, access to information are also being silenced. So each one here, you will identify yourself, you might be belonging 1 or 2 or 3 of the 7 categories which I have listed. That's why solidarity of human rights defenders to have a common platform of action, common voice, common solidarity is critically needed. And I'm so happy that Professor Adriano and the Center and the Southern defenders have provided that platform. If protection, you fail here, you elevate that request to the Southern defenders. If Southern defenders could not entertain that particular call, they elevate to Pan-African defenders in Kampala. And so we all in support for individual human rights defenders in need of protection. ID creates a presence. When you have an ID, you show it. In South Sudan now, when you're a human rights defender and you show, it brings the authorities to attention. I am human rights defender and this is my ID card. It's identity, very powerful identity, because it gives you a recognition and the space where you can have a conversation. I'm recognized, I'm here. So you will continue on that, and I think each one of you have to get one. I'm here to give solidarity in this exercise you are going to start of election and all that. And my care-of is Professor Adriano and CDD. I'm looking forward to further conversations to this beautiful country and the beautiful human rights, people who struggle to make this country better. You deserve recognition. It was not part of the program, but I want to recognize he might be seeing when he picked me up from the airport, but he was thinking, this is my chief. No. This stick is a Maasai stick. You're close here, some of you East African kind of, because you have Indian Ocean. Maasai stick, or people who are nomadic, move from one place to another, they have elders. When you reach that elders, it means this is talking stick. When I say, it means you listen to me. I'm an elder and I want to speak. Everybody else have to keep quiet. So his ID, Professor Adriano, please come here. Please clap for him. His ID, apart from the IDs, is now issuing, he will have one. But primarily his ID, and I really mean it, primarily your ID is when you carry this stick. Everybody else have to listen to you. Defender of defenders. I salute you. I salute you. I salute you. Yeah. Thank you. Please have it. Appreciate it. With that chiefdom, which I've already recognized, I want to stop here, and my solidarity and my salute. Obrigado.
E estas foram as notas de abertura do presidente da African Defenders e diretor executivo da Defenders, Hassan Shire. Foram mais do que notas de abertura, tivemos aqui a oportunidade de ouvir esta partilha de conhecimento sobre os desafios e o impacto do trabalho dos defensores. Minhas senhoras e meus senhores, com vossa permissão, gostava de convidar a todos e a todas para uma foto de família, mesmo nas escadas aqui do hotel. Vamos logo a seguir ter um espaço para um lanche. Voltamos para a segunda e a última parte do nosso evento. Portanto, temos 15 minutos para a foto de família, para o lanche, e voltamos para a segunda e última parte do nosso evento. Muito obrigada.